training for people who will be presenting on the Indigenous grocery store for Santa Fe Days in historic Carrollton, downtown Carrollton. All right, so this is the Indigenous grocery store. It's a it's really a table. This is a table. I love the idea that some of our mountains really recognize that our mountains are like tables of food. And so many of the things that we talk about in traditional indigenous cultures recognizes the importance of food as part of our culture and what we need to survive. So much so that one of the original creation stories around corn from what we call Mesoamerica or pre-Columbian Mexico talks about how the corn comes to the people when Quetzalcoatl, the great Quetzalcoatl, the precious, the plumed serpent or the precious serpent, is looking for, sees a seed being carried on the back of the ant. And he asks the ant, where have you gotten that seed? What is it? And the ant says, this is corn. And he's like, he wants to know more. What is this corn? Because he needs to bring food back to the people. And the ant says, and he goes, where did you get this corn, this seed? And the ant looks and doesn't want to tell him at first. And then he says, well, over there in Food Mountain, in Sustenance Mountain. So here today we have this, our small little table of our little mountain of food that we're going to be talking about. So corn, we're going to really focus on the three sisters and how they are really come together to create a complete protein from a very physical level. From a spiritual level, many ceremonies and traditional knowledge is woven together based on this relationship with these three plants and foods. And then also that how stories come together also based on that relationship that people have with the importance of being able to survive and the things that have been provided by nature. So I guess I'll begin with the corn. And then I will begin with the corn. I'll talk a little bit about the squash, and then we'll talk about the beans and then the squash, and then I'd like to talk about chocolate. One thing you'll find when you're talking to people about any kind of traditional knowledge is they're going to have a lot of questions, and you'll need to have kind of have the headline version of what you want to share with them, and then as they ask more questions, then you'll you can draw more on the knowledge that you have. When you're working in this kind of environment where you're in a fair or in a public, you only have so long to keep their attention. But what we found with the Indigenous grocery store last year is that there's so much volume to what we have. There's so much. It's just so you're drawn to just like the weight of the food when you see all the seeds piled upon each other, and you see all of the beans, and you see all these different colors, and a lot of food really is very visual and textual, and I guess probably when we put it in packages it kind of loses some of the beauty of the seeds that they have. It really is God's artwork to see these seeds. So with corn, there's you could speak for 5 minutes just on corn alone, because corn has a medicinal value, but also a cultural value in the sense of even the kind of corn that's grown. So most people, gosh, today they don't even know how to cook corn, right? Or they don't even know how you're supposed to, whether you're supposed to cook it with the husk on or not. They may not even know what this is. A lot of people don't know how to cook corn, grill it, or even work on a fire with corn. And they don't even know that you can actually use every part of the corn, and has been used traditionally. Every part of the corn has been utilized for something beyond even eating. And so the corn, what I love about the corn is it really teaches us about how life takes care of itself. Because this corn is born with all of these babies. These are all babies. Each one of these seeds is a baby. So this corn is actually born with all its ovaries. All these little it has the ability to reproduce itself, but it needs humankind to plant it. So corn is, evolves out of human intervention with the Theosynthi grass, which was a wild grass that some innovative farmer, thousands of years ago, noticed that this was an interesting plant, and that Theosynthi in and of itself is not edible, but as it began to be cultivated, and they cultivated and actually did some kind of genetic engineering to strengthen the seed, it evolves into what we know today as corn. There are so many varieties of corn, and each native community will have their own corn. And of course there's all these stories about the migration of corn, how you can even track some of the seeds and how they migrate into different communities. And then the corn gets adapted. So Hopi corn, which is a very famous blue corn, the Hopis, through their own native agriculture and their relationship to where they live, developed a particular kind of corn that's very close to the ground and doesn't need as much watering, because a lot of their watering traditionally has been done through rain and solely through rainfall. And so for the Hopi, corn is part of their life. And so they have very, very complex ceremonies and songs to recognize the spirit of the corn and also the rain, because you can't grow corn without the water. And so that just shows you then how their culture has also evolved in the prayers that they do, because of the sacredness and how they value corn in their culture and in their ability to remain Hopi people and to feed their people. So this corn has both, within itself, contains both its male and female parts that help it to reproduce itself. It just needs us to put it in the ground. And in addition to being able to adapt to a lot of different environments, the corn in and of itself, what I love about, for instance, in Mexico, one of the legacies to indigenous people there is that how it has been used, every part of the corn is used and not wasted, so that not only do you eat the corn, but you save the corn silk, and as it dries, becomes darker, it's ready then for making a tea. And this corn silk is then used medicinally. Whereas this corn here, not only, aside from eating this and having this corn on the cob, these might be saved and used to help to actually flavor the meat. And so when you eat a tamal, right, or what people know in English as a tamale, right, this is the corn husks that are being used. So one of the things that comes from indigenous cultures is the ability to know how to recycle and to use everything. So in traditional agriculture, in Mexico they say, traditionally they say tira nada, don't throw anything away. So whatever is usable, you try to use. And traditionally, many cultures, even the people in Appalachia, the famous, corn cob, what are those, pipes, right? So that the cob was also saved, and the cob was used for kindling, and it's also was originally a form of toilet paper. So in addition to that, the cob may be used even for a traditional massage. So the cob could be used kind of to put acupressure, dried on the skin. So we have many, so you can see that how there's many uses for the corn. This corn can be prepared so many different ways. Aside from being roasted, it might be mashed and made into a corn pudding. It might be mashed and made into a corn cake, made into corn soup. Now this kind of corn is not really, this is the sweet corn, right? But really, this is a corn that now is what most people are used to seeing. Or if you buy corn, in a can, this is the kind of corn you're getting. This is Indian corn here, and so it has more fiber in it, it has less sugars, and it also has a casing that requires a certain amount of processing to be able to access all the nutrients of the corn. And so through a native science, indigenous peoples figured out you just couldn't eat the corn and boil it when you have this Indian corn. It had to be processed either through adding lime or with ash to be able to wash up the hull of this seed. So this is an example of Indian corn that you might even see in like what we know as pozole, okay, or menudo would be this kind of Indian corn. This is a blue corn. And what's interesting is that corn is even used to talk about the original creation of humanity. So one of the Mayan stories that I was taught was how, in fact, there are the four corners, the colors of the corn represent the four colors of the world, each being representing the primary kind of ethnic divisions that people that separate people as we know them today, and so it'd be the white corn, the yellow corn, and the blue corn representing the darker skinned people, and how all these corns came together to create the four important colors of corn that we know today, and so that in many ways we all came from similar origins or as human beings, and yet each one of us is distinct and by design of our corn. And there's even stories about how the corn was being cooked, and it got cooked for a really long time, and so that's how we had the dark corn, the blue corn, and then some corn was cooked for a lesser time, and that's how you had the white corn, and then the red corn was cooked in a certain way, and that's how we have the red people. And so that's there's many variations of that among the Mayan people about the four colors of the corn representing the four great colors of the world from the different continents. In addition to having corn, like corn soup or roasting corn was also and is also processed so that it becomes ground, and that's how you get cornbread. Okay, and so this is some nice blue corn meal. And the cornmeal can be made into a traditional corn drink that in Spanish is called atole, which comes from the word atoli, and really means water that's stirred. It's sometimes people will call that corn pudding, Indian corn pudding. But there's many different ways to make this. Sometimes sweet, sometimes with cinnamon. Sometimes with cinnamon, which is also a traditional crop of the Americas, which was a good natural sweetener to it. Sometimes with chili, actually, to make it kind of salty and chili, and that's called chilatole, a very traditional Indian drink from Mexico. And so what's great about corn is that corn has lots of calcium. So a pregnant mom eating corn tortillas and then eating beans, well, we have green beans here. Well, here's some beans. We have these different beans. Would have a balanced protein. And what's interesting is just like corn and beans complement each other in the human body, corn and beans complement each other in the garden. And so there are many stories about the Three Sisters Garden. This is one book that y'all might want to draw from in your resources as you start to do the presentations. But certainly the Three Sisters Garden, meaning the corns, the beans, and the squash, are many native peoples all over the Americas have a tradition of growing beans, corn, and squash together. And what's beautiful about having beans is that you're really optimizing your space in a garden by growing beans along the corn stalk. And it's so beautiful to see the beans get married to the corn. Of course, you have to make that intervention of getting the beans to start curling around.